Well, welcome everyone. I'm Wendy Hanamura, I'm the Director of Partnerships for the Internet Archive, and I'm so happy to see all of you and so many friends who are with us at this place, at DWeb Camp. I want to introduce to you my co-moderator of this event. This is Shokunin. He is the founder, Shokunin, of PermaWeb. Shokunin, what does Shokunin mean?
It means craftsman in Japanese. It's my online handle. My real name is Ranin. You can find me with that too, but you know, in these events, Shokunin works. And craftsman in Japanese has a bit of a different meaning than in English, because for us it means like, I make tables and stuff like that. In Japanese culture, it's more about the philosophy of craftsmanship, about dedicating yourself to being better at something and trying to build the best thing, and that's what I try to do for the internet.
Cool. My last name is Hanamura, and that means flower village. So if you happen to be in Scuttlebutt, I am Hanamura in Scuttlebutt. So tonight, this is the DWeb San Francisco Meetup. How many people, this is your first time to one of these? Very good.
Thank you.
How many, this is your first time to a decentralized web event? Don't be shy, many of us.
Aside from DWeb Camp?
How many of you went to DWeb Camp with us in July? Cool. Okay. Well, this is for builders and dreamers and people who are interested in diving into the concept that there is a web that's better than the one we have, a web that we want, a web that we deserve. And I see in the audience so many people who are engaged in building that web. So we thought we would get started tonight by asking you to introduce yourselves and maybe just a little bit about what brings you here. If you have a desire, a wish, you know, I really want to learn more about X, please say it, because probably someone who can answer your wish is in the audience. And then do you want to tell them the rest of the game plan?
Sure thing. All right, so after the introductions, we'll be going through a number of talks that we have here. So many of the people here who are at the DWeb Camp, they have really cool projects going on that you may or may not know. And they've had a lot of cool developments in the past few months. So we're going to be covering basically what happened there. That's pretty much that at the moment, I think. Yes.
You know, because we're taping, I think, should we ask people to stand up, Cole, and come over here? Is that okay with you guys?
Sounds great.
Okay, we're just going to go down the list, and Jochen, why don't you come up and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Joachim from Berlin, and I'm founder of Eurocom, and also one of the co-creators of DWeb. And
What are you doing here?
I'm actually in town for the Internet Identity Workshop down in Mountain View, and of course for this meetup.
Yeah.
Right?
Yay. Matt?
Who's next?
Hello everyone, I am Matt Davis. I'm the co-founder of a project called Change Labs that I'll be speaking more about in a little while here. I live here in San Francisco and have been involved in the DWeb community for a couple years now.
Hi, I'm Margaret Warren, and I first got involved with the decentralized web concepts in February, I think, at a DWeb meetup that was here, and then I became very involved in the DWeb Camp, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about that more and how it relates to a system that I created for describing images using linked data, and how linked data and knowledge graphs relate to decentralization. So I'm going to do a little bit on that in a few minutes. So, okay.
Hi, I'm Rob Lampier. I manage the core infrastructure group here at Internet Archive.
And if you want to work at the Internet Archive as an engineer.
Yes, and please, if you want to, come talk to me if you want to work here as an engineer.
Hi, I'm Ben. I work at the Electronic Frontier Foundation and also here on behalf of pseudomesh and peoplesopen.net. I helped with the deployment of the network at DWeb Camp, and I'll be, I think, talking a little bit more about that later.
Hi, I'm Mai Sutton. I was the associate producer of DWeb Camp. I am a steward with the People's Open Network / pseudo mesh. I'm a overall activist and organizer fighting for the digital commons.
Hey, I'm Brandon Wallace.
Hey, I'm Drew. I'm Drew.
That's me. And we're making community collaboration tools, plant systems, and we're actually here staying at the mushroom farm and using the mushroom farm as a little template for that. And we've also started DWeb Austin. So if you're in Austin, hit us up.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And Bryn's with us as well. Part of DWeb Camp has been meeting new people, so a big step forward for us also was meeting Bryn here from Houston, a close neighbor, and with his own project, Exxon.
Yeah, so I am interested in distributed state trees, CRDTs, things like that, and I've been working on Axon, which is like a scientific GitHub, basically, for massive data sets and data collaboration, things like that. So I'm trying to kind of weave a web between the projects that I encountered here, including Plan and Brave, which I think you'll hear about in just a second, because there's some really interesting architecture there.
Cool.
And we'd love to meet some Unity developers.
I'm Michael, and I really enjoyed going to the DWeb Camp too, and meeting a bunch of people. I was like, we're all doing very similar stuff. And what I'm trying to do is get this distributed technologies into the HTTP protocol. So I've been going to the IETF meetings where they're standardizing things, and I think we're going to have a pretty good shot. And so if anyone's interested in getting their tech into HTTP, come talk to me. The project is also called Braid. It's at braid.news.
How do you spell that?
BRAID.news.
Our new arrival, would you like to come and introduce yourself?
No pressure. Just if you can tell us who you are and what kind of project you're working with, if you have any idea, maybe who do you like to meet here or something.
Sorry.
Welcome.
I'm Suri. I do systems and infrastructure work. I'm just interested in the space around the decentralized web and technology and all that.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I work on a project called Textile. We are working on open building blocks around IPFS to help people create cool projects, and I'm going to share a couple of the ideas that we have a little later.
Cool.
Hey everyone, I'm Kyle Tutt with Pinata. We build dedicated IPFS networks for blockchain applications. So basically the majority of data is actually stored off-chain, and we use the immutability of IPFS to point that on-chain. And we build networks from a couple nodes up to a lot of nodes. So glad to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm a robotics engineer. I work on self-driving cars. Previously, I used to work on lunar rovers. But internet in general is something that's close to my heart. I believe in open, free, accessible internet. And I feel you guys are doing good work. So Francis here introduced me to Internet Archive, and I've been a proud supporter of the archive for a while. So yeah, happy to learn from you.
Hi, I'm Clara. I came here for the pizza. Brian over there brought me here tonight. I am working on content moderation and trust and safety and building an organization around that, and really here to get some insights from really interesting projects that are thinking about this in the decentralized web. So.
Hi there, my name is Matthew Shooty. I work on a project called HoloChain. We are building a framework for building and running peer-to-peer applications. And I'm basically here because these are my people. And it's always good to get to know more of you. I'm not in town all that often. I mostly spend my time running around the world trying to explain what we work on and why it might matter. So it's nice to be home and get to like rub elbows with the folks that are actually crawling the space in slightly different ways than we are. I always find it enriching.
Yeah.
Next.
Hi, my name is Carl Orange. I am an independent mobile app developer and full stack developer. And I love coming here to the archive and attending the various events, and I learn a lot here. I am working on a project that I'm not ready to tell you about yet, but I am thinking about how to connect between different DWeb applications. So.
Hi, I'm Michael. I am a founder in a unrelated space, but I'm here tonight because I see the decentralized web as essential to essentially the maintenance of democracy and human rights. It's a fundamental, and I see some of the tools that are being developed as fundamental towards the re-decentralization of the web that would be essential to maintaining that status quo. So, I'm non-technical. I do business model innovation and kind of partnerships and so on, and I'm trying to figure out how, what's happening in this space and how it can be involved.
Yep.
Hi everyone, I'm Eddie. I've been in this like decentralization, distributed networks, etc. space for the last 2 years, and I'm mostly studying reputation networks and like sense-making tools. How can we like utilize decentralization methods, etc., etc. Basically, a lot of blockchain stuff, and I'm playing with a lot of products right now, like ideas, etc. And I just moved to the Bay Area like 3 weeks ago from Istanbul, Turkey. And I'm looking to either build a new company or join one working in this space. And I'll be talking about one of my ideas later on lightning talks.
Hi, I'm Amy Chen, and I have a startup project called History Ledger, which is a new social media in history on a blockchain site. No advertising, with verified users, and we pay for it through the distributed content storage.
Hello. My name is Mark Carranza. You want to be an engineer here? I'm an engineer here. Let's see. On my side note, I'm trying to figure out a way how to index the entire internet, or actually the entirety of human knowledge. So ask me about it. But basically, the notion is cooperative intelligence rather than the other intelligences that are out there. Ms. Francis?
Hi, I'm Frances Sawyer, and I used to work at the archive, but no longer, but I focus on policy, and so really interested in continuing a lot of the conversations from the DWeb Camp about the intersection between technology and society.
And wait, what do you do now, Francis?
Oh, I'm currently a policy advisor for Tom Steyer's presidential campaign.
So if you want to work for Tom Steyer.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is David Phillips. I've spent the last year working at the intersection of mental health and machine learning. All of your biggest fans, so I'll cheerlead basically anything you're doing. And I'm here to meet people who also get really excited about ethics and making things really easy to use. If you need help doing the last thing, making things easy to use, always happy to chime in or run experiments or user studies, whatever you need. So that's all.
I'm Brian Bellender. I work at the Linux Foundation, another one of these impossibly idealistic foundations based here in San Francisco. I lead something called Hyperledger, which is like a family of different blockchain-related technologies that are getting a fair bit of use out there. I am here because I wanted to kind of get like that readout from the camp. I wasn't able to make it that weekend, so I'm really excited to hear about kind of that. One of the things that's really motivating me now is the application of this tech to self-sovereign ID, try to get us out of the traps we've fallen into with big centralized identity services. There's so much excitement going on with protocols and wallets and things like that that I feel like really there's this optimism that I haven't felt in like 15 years about internet technologies as a tool of liberation. So really excited about that.
Hey, I'm Diana Greer. I don't want to talk about my projects because I'm really shy about that, but right away I think that we need to have a Women of DWeb subgroup, because I get so excited when I see another woman at one of these events. It's kind of unbalanced. But I have three separate groups that I would love to get on the decentralized internet just to try it out. But I cannot enthuse other people about doing something like that. It's like trying to explain email in the 80s.
Hello, my name is Jack. I work at the Web3 Foundation here from Zug, Switzerland for a couple months. And yeah, I'm here because usually the Internet Archive does good events, has good people come out, and DWeb Camp was a lot of fun. So excited by digitally native, like autonomous organizations that also are economically powerful and can help us not rely on necessarily corporations or nations, but something maybe new, a new form of human organization. And that's why I work at the Web3 Foundation on a project called Polkadot, because I think it might be one of those. And yeah, that's all for me, really.
Before you start speaking, I'm getting a note from one of our remote viewers that everybody should speak into the mic directly.
I'm John Wilkinson. I'm a server programmer, kind of new to DWeb, but excited to learn more about it and how to get our data out of corporations and such.
Hey, I'm Chris Katoya. I'm co-founder of Web along with Levine over there. I love DWeb Camp. It's awesome. And I'm also an executive advisor at Block Science, which does the complex systems engineering, and we do a lot of work with blockchain-related companies. So I see a lot of projects and help them as well.
Hi, I'm Allison. I am actually a consultant, a very traditional consultant. I do business strategy and analytic development, and I know very little about this entire thing. But I was incentivized to learn about it, so I'm here to learn.
Hi, I'm Ashley Tyson. I'm with the Web3 Foundation. Like Jack, I'm here from Zug for the next 2.5 months. We're evaluating expanding our presence into San Francisco. So we're looking specifically to meet with a bunch of different people. Our organization gives away grants and helps support different organizations that are working on decentralized tech. So please feel free to find me or Jack, and we'd love to hear more about what everyone's working on. And thank you to Wendy and the Internet Archive for always hosting amazing events like this.
Ashley, I'm going to put you on the spot. And tell us how you define Web3. Jack can help you too.
Yeah, well, I think it's up to everyone to kind of define for themselves. But you know, I think the collective vision that we have at Web3 Foundation is that it's an internet that allows users to empower themselves. So we're anti-surveillance, anti-censorship. We're for users owning their data. So that's generally what we stand for.
Well, thank you. I wanted to start us off, and I'm going to borrow this. Did everyone get to introduce themselves? Cole is with the Internet Archive. He's our cameraman tonight. Some of you are here for the first time, and some of you are at your first decentralized web event. So help out our collective community and help me define what some people call Web3, some people call the decentralized web, some people call it the distributed web. What do we mean by that? Anyone? What are some of the tenets that you would say are essential to the decentralized web?
So I'm going to try to explain how I picture it in my head. So basically, we keep ordering things, like the light waves, sound waves, etc. And everybody orders events
from their perspective. And then our like centralized like Web 2 companies are ordering mechanisms for a lot of people. So like it orders information for like billions of people, but like when this, and it's powerful, it's how we shape reality in that sense, but I won't go that way. So like when there are a lot of like large centralized entities doing the reality ordering for us, it becomes a threat for the collaboration. Like it becomes like if an entity fucks up, the fuck up gets bigger, it affects all of us, etc. So like Web3 for me is that large corporations not doing the ordering for us, we do the ordering. And what I mean by ordering is that like what I share, like what I get feeded, like memetically, or like ideas, etc. So like it's basically, like she said, like empowering individuals from the ordering perspective in my head. We change how we order things basically with Web 2 and Web 3.
Thank you. Anyone else want to submit a core feature that you would imagine would be part of this web? Come on up. We're trying to address our friends out in the live stream world too.
Great. Hello, friends in the live stream world. I am a set of pixels connecting to you through the web. What I'm excited about with this decentralized web movement is the new technology that we're making available. I think a lot of people got excited about blockchains because it could do stuff, it could make money we hadn't seen before. And we have other things we can do with cryptography and hash tables and routing. But what's coming together right now is that we can do all these things together. And that's what the original web was. The original web was just, let's all use the same protocol, guys. You know, it's gonna make everything a lot easier. And it's actually a really remarkable design that satisfied a whole bunch of different people's needs all at once. And so we're getting all of us in the same room together and hashing that out. And this consensus and community building for new technologies, I think is, I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Oh, thank you.
Hey y'all, I'm Drew. I love that tip on interoperability is how I hear that. Are we using open standards? Is what we're creating, does it have open standards? Is it interoperable? Is it sort of gatekeeperless, right? And part of that is the data my data? Do I have total data ownership? Or can someone else decide that that's not the case and turn me or my community off? Or also, does this next generation web technology or connective technology, is it able to still function even if some upstream network pipe goes down? Can my community and the people I'm in a relationship still function, get utility out of this? So I think those are some of the things that, like, kind of the core pillar values that resonate for me.
Come on up.
So I went to Burning Man for the first time this past year. And I'm gonna use a Burning Man analogy. So Web 1.0 started off with really just hyperlinks linking everyone together. Web 2.0 came together and it was a lot of blogs, social media networks, but Web 3.0 is really what in Burning Man analogy you call radical self-reliance, where everyone can have full power over what they control, as Web 2.0 led to a lot of centralized players who actually impact the way that we experience the internet, the way that information is no longer democratized but actually monetized by certain major players. Web 3.0 is really the Burning Man of the internet, where everyone can have radical self-reliance over things that they want to do with full autonomy. So.
I guess there's two things that I see. One of them being Web3 being the bringing in the spatial element and the actual real world more able to relate to the digital world. So, you know, mapping and information that you would see right now, it's in these 2D interfaces, and I think
we'll start to expand that capability to where we see more of what's in the environment actually able to fold into our digital systems. And the other thing is the recognition of decentralization isn't the only job that we have to do. It's actually a little bit more deeper. Peter Wang, he's the CTO of Anaconda, talks about the orthogonal web and protecting 3 fundamental aspects of information, one being content, one being the lines of transmission, and one being identity. And that if you compromise one of those aspects, you can't be turning over the other 2, you know, and they each have to be independently operating so that they're not putting our information and our data and our identities into a state of compromise. And we currently are in the state where, you know, you let Google do the transmission for you, let's say, and now they know who you are and they know the content, and they basically have like 90% of all emails and all search results, and just untenable kind of situation. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. So, back in 2015, I think, the Occam came from Berlin, and there was a movement building throughout Europe about decentralization. And at that point, I don't think any of us had ever even heard that term. And he founded the first conference on these shores called Get D. And it was in this little Victorian kind of great place in the Haight, and people, it was very unconferencey. And I think it planted a seed for the founder of this place, Brewster Kahle, because he was asked by the presidents of 5 foundations to give a moonshot for the internet. And I think they thought he'd talk about the Library of Alexandria for the digital age, but I said, oh, come on, Brewster, you always talk about that. Give me a real moonshot. And he said, well, okay, a moonshot. The web we have now, it's not private, it's not secure, it's still fun, but it could be so much better. And I heard at this conference the seeds of people are building it, and I think we could bring it together. There's the blockchains, and there's the, there's the transport layer, and he kind of just painted this picture of what this decentralized stack could be. And because he painted a picture and put it out there, one by one, the founders started to come and visit us. So first was Juan Benet, who was like, I think he was still at Stanford, and he was wearing his hoodie, and he said, yeah, I want to do this. I want to do the whole thing. You know, I want to build protocol labs like the new Bell Labs. I want it to be big and make everything over. And then Trent McConaughey came from Berlin, and he was building at that time a decentralized database. And then Max Ogden came, and he was building the DAT protocol. So we started to see all of these founders building these different pieces that we could bring together to work together to build something called, eventually, we named it the decentralized web. But that's just the beginning, isn't it? Because you need more than just tool builders if you're going to build something that's going to work for the world. You need philosophers and lawyers and dreamers and policymakers and writers and communicators. And so in July, we decided to hold this thing called the decentralized DWeb Camp. We decided to shorten it to DWeb, and that it wouldn't be just technologists, it should be all the builders and all the dreamers it would take to fuel a global movement. And I don't know, I'm just wondering, for those of you who attended, could you share a little bit about how it was for you? Come on, Matthew. Okay, I have to say, the last time I saw Matthew was at 5 a.m. and we were we had gone to the cacao ceremony, and we were just so wired on cacao. And I was like, yes, tell me about holochain. Like, I've never been more awake in my whole life.
Yeah. Word to the wise, cacao keeps you awake, and they served it to us at midnight. So we were not so savvy, but we are now. So my experience of DWeb Camp was, it was not a let me pitch you my idea, let me tell you about my startup kind of event. It was very much about the human relationships. And for somebody like me, it was getting to see lots of old friends. I had started a meetup here in San Francisco called Build the Collaborative Internet back in 2012, and a whole bunch of those folks were were there, and so it was great to reconnect, but also to see people that you only get to see online, or that you only hear about, right? Because everybody's busy doing their own projects, and to meet new people, right? There were Scuttlebutt is this interesting project that some of you are familiar with, and that I'm a fan of, but there was this other project called Wireline that I'd never heard of before that's kind of a little bit like Scuttlebutt, has a little bit of holochain stuff, and there was IPFS people there, and so there's all these different little pockets of folks working on different projects. Some are really into the networking stuff, some are really into building apps, some are blockchain like through and through, and they know it's going to save everything, you know. But it was deeply human, right? There was camping, there were campfires, there were cacao ceremonies. There was, I would say it was messy. It was really decentralized. Like where things are going to be was very decentralized. Right? Every space kind of had its own little board, and there was a couple of different online apps that you could use. We may use a little bit more centralization next year. But it was incredibly rich. I think everybody that I've spoken to about it basically said, yes, more of this. This is real. This is the warm, in my world we talk about warm data. This is the interrelationship building that's actually needed for this community to really take off, right? It's not about do a deal. It's about, do I know you? Do we have a deep enough relationship that we can actually call one another or reach out and ask for guidance or ask for introductions? And I felt like it really, it was a different feel than the conferences have been. And it was very much needed and wonderful.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share kind of their own experience? Okay, well, I am going to ask then our associate producer, Mai Sutton, who in many ways was the conscience of the decentralized web. We co-created this thing. Come on in. We co-created this. But, you know, whenever you're building something new, there's so many different considerations. And whenever we were trying, honestly, whenever I was trying to cut corners, Mai would say, oh, no, we need to do it this way because that's what's right. And I said, okay. But anyway, I'd like to introduce Mai, who was going to talk to you about her experiences.
Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing? So I was brought in April to work on DWeb Camp. I had been to the DWeb Summit the last 2 times in 2016 and 2018 and saw that this was going to be a very different event. In 2016 and in 2018, there was definitely much more of a focus on the technology aspect of it, I would say. And there was a very conscientious sort of shift with DWeb Camp, let alone, you know, the fact that we were camping outside, we were going to be out off the one in this like former mushroom farm with all these radical folks. It was going to be smaller. It was going to be focused on how the internet should be grounded in our experience and our relationships with each other and our relationship to the earth, you know, just by camping and by talking about farming and all that. So I was really excited to be part of this event because I think that decentralization, in a way, this is my opinion obviously, is that decentralization isn't really a principle. I think it's more of a feature. It's a description of the topology of a network. It's about being in opposition to all of the horrible things that we've seen unfold with the internet that we know today, which is centralized, Facebook, Google, obviously, and all these platforms. And when I think about the term decentralization, I didn't want to get up because I was going to say this now, when we were talking about what decentralization means to us. I think it's really an opening to talk about what is it that we want to build that lies in opposition to these systems that we feel so bad about, that we feel bad about using Facebook, we feel bad about using, you know, ISPs like Verizon, Comcast, AT&T, And for me, I think we have to really think about some really fundamental questions about how we organize ourselves and how we relate to each other. So for me, the kind of decentralized networks that I think are really important and that would really be revolutionary are the ones that acknowledge our histories and acknowledge the reality that we live in. One major aspect of the DWeb Camp that I found really important was our Global Fellows Program. And we brought folks from all over the world, from Bangalore to Brazil, from locally, from an indigenous nation, from the Ama Mutsun, and they provided a whole another perspective about what decentralization means. And to them, it's not, just creating a new protocol, not just creating a technology because it's interesting and just because it's decentralized technically, but actually because they are listening and they're embedded in these communities that maybe don't have access to the internet, or maybe because the internet has failed them in other ways, and they're building their own. And I think, to me, decentralization means that more people have governance and ownership over their networks. And what a network means can be very different from, someone who doesn't have access to the internet at all to someone maybe in Oakland, where I work on a mesh project, a wireless mesh project, to wherever. So I think that as a community, as DWebbers, I like to call ourselves, I want to think about what do we stand for? I think it's really easy when we use the term decentralization to be very clear about what we're against. We're against surveillance, probably. We're against, censorship, obviously. But when I think about examples like LibreCoin, which is a Facebook-led, it's a consortium of 27 corporations that are creating a alternative currency to try and just, I guess, upend, disrupt the currency system that we have today. Arguably, that is decentralized. There's 27 organizations. They're governing these things, together. They're talking about it. They're making the system that is not centralized in a certain way. How many people here are a fan of LibreCoin or think that, I don't want to call you out, I guess. But I'm not a fan. Right, there's someone who's rooting for LibreCoin. I think it's a joke. And so, what is it about LibreCoin that is offensive to us, right? We should be thinking about, if LibreCoin is offensive to us, why? Is it because it's a corporation? Why is it that these corporations are offensive to us? Is it because they're solely for profit? Maybe. Is it because, we don't trust the corporations that are one of these 27 companies? Probably. And so I think it's really important for us to have some hard conversations about what we stand for. And as a radical person who lives in Oakland, I work at the Oakland Public Library. I constantly see people who are struggling with everyday things like signing up for getting a job, getting access to food, things like that. To me, it means dealing with situations that the most marginalized, the people who are suffering most in our communities and in the world, and figuring out how our communication systems can actually address that. We just came out of this whole climate strike the last few weeks, and clearly our systems are failing. And what are ways that we make different systems? And I think having networks, having platforms where we're communicating better, where we're seeing each other, we're seeing how other people might live different lives, but we might want to be in solidarity with them. How is it that decentralization can do that? And I think putting ourselves outside in a campsite, talking about it, making ourselves vulnerable, acknowledging that we might come with different perspectives, I think is a really great first step. And I think the point, I knew a lot of people who came up to me and came to Wendy and was like, this conference is so transformative to me, it's so great, blah, blah, blah. That was amazing. The point when I was like, okay, this might have changed some people's lives was when there was 3 people that I saw across the last few days. I don't think they knew each other. There were like 3 white dudes, which have been the most common demographic for DWeb events, where they got up and said, this event really has made me question a lot of things about the way I build technology. And it's made me think about my position in this world, and it's, you know, I have a lot to think about, is what they said. And I think going to that uncomfortable place is really important, and that's, I think, that personal transformation, and then building those bridges to the people that we know are allies, but then acknowledging those who might not reach out to us because, you know, we're from a different world or different community. I think that is really important. So transforming ourselves to transform the web is a piece that I wrote as well right before the event. I would check it out if you're interested in what I was saying there, but that's the essential gist is let's really do a lot of reflection about where we come from individually and build solidarity to build an actual radical revolutionary internet. Or not internet, webs. Many webs of various sizes. Thank you.
All right. Hope you can hear us good, internet streamer person. Not streamer, I guess listener. Sorry, we're the ones streaming. So we have quite the packed program tonight still. Quite a few speakers still. Joachim, you've been introduced earlier, so I'll let you take care of this when you get back on stage very soon. I'll also be speaking right now actually about PermaWeb, my experience of DWeb Camp and the whole ecosystem, followed by Andrew from Textile. Textile is building this really, really cool dev tool that helps people build on the DWeb. So this SDK that helps people build really cool apps on top of IPFS. Who here has heard of IPFS? About 2/3 of people, maybe a little bit more. So that's cool. You should really try out their tool. We depend on it for my start on PermaWeb, so you're gonna hear more about that. Margaret Warren. So you're from Image Snippets, and can you tell us a little bit about what you'll be sharing?
I'm going to talk about my experiences at DWeb Camp. We're talking about my experiences at DWeb Camp and how it relates to the work that I do with Image Snippets.
Awesome. We also have Matt Davis from chainmaps.io. Where are you, Matt? Hello. Do you want to tell us briefly what you'll be doing?
Sure. Similarly, I'll be talking about my experience at DWeb Camp and how it inspired me to create this organization, Change Less.
Wonderful. All right. We also have, let me see, Brandon Wallace and Drew Mira. Are you here? Yes. Yeah. You've introduced yourself briefly earlier. Will you be telling us about your experience at DWeb Camp also?
Yeah, we'll just say a few words about DWeb Camp and then we'll talk about the design pillars for the system that we're building. Our framework for how we choose what our system looks like.
Wonderful. If you're interested in speaking here, I mean, it's very packed tonight, but we will try to make some room for you. So come to me inside or something if you want to have a quick lightning session at the end of this. We will do our best to fit you here. We're doing this monthly, so we'll definitely make room for you if we can tonight. Talks will be, we're aiming for 5 minutes long. We're not going to be religious about it, but we'll try to aim for 5 minutes. Yeah, well, that's about that. I'm going to get started. So, DWeb Camp, it was really interesting for us. It started with, well, looked like a regular weekend. We thought we were going to a regular conference, so we went there with Andrew. Hey, Andrew, thanks for driving us. It was very nice. And we weren't quite sure what to expect. We had tents, and so that was obviously different from other web conferences and stuff. And very quickly, once we set up, I was brought in front of this fire pit of people and asked to explain a French word, because I am French, and share a concept that we thought is relevant to the DWeb and this kind of thing. So I explained the French word fraternité, which sounds like the word fraternity in English, and it's not about fraternities. It's not this kind of like vibe of getting drunk and bros and shit. It's like brotherhood. It's a good thing. And so it was interesting to see that there's already this like sense of a community and thing going on basically with people there. So initially I was very much there to be like, oh, I give a talk on the DWeb stack, how do you build products for the perma web, like for the decentralized web. A lot of people right now in this community is very technical, right? It's like there's a series of nodes and you connect together and you have these SDKs and you build apps this way and stuff, and that's true. But most people that use the internet, they think of it like, you know, there's services, you go on a little website, you put your photo in there, you click send, boom, it's there, they add message each other and this kind of stuff. So how do you turn the DWeb into that? And that's what I spoke about, and that was very much my goal. I didn't realize a lot more than that. So essentially, we at PermaWeb, with Chris, and with the help of the textile people, we're working on making a Facebook groups alternative on the DWeb, which really means, like, I mean, I like the experience of having a group online. I'd like to connect with people and being able to say, hey, there's this meetup tonight. I'd like to hang with you guys and have pizza and drinks and talk about this stuff I care about, meet like-minded people. This is why I love this place at the archive. But that comes currently with the price of these people are going to mine my data and sell my data and spy on me and keep the logs forever and put me on a list or something. That's absolute garbage. So we're trying to solve for that. We think that IPFS is a really good way to deal with that, as long as you have encryption, because you have these hard links that stay alive forever, but you can also self-host your things. You can have your own node, you can have your own content, so that if we get hit by a bus, you can still run your own service, doesn't matter. You can still use that stuff. You don't depend on a centralized service, especially one with a strong agenda like Facebook. So DWeb Camp turned out to be this very good place for us to meet like-minded people. Because honestly, we were like, well, so I've been helping organize the IPFS meetup in SF, and it's a group of maybe 40 people. DWeb Camp was 10 times that. And so most of these people I even hear about ever on the internet. So it's really cool to see, you know, something different. In my normal life, most of my friends work at Facebook and Google. They work on these, like, what they think is making the world a better place. And sometimes I feel like a bit like I live on an island on my own with my own views and stuff. So it's just cool to get to see you people. It was very valuable to us in the sense, and I'm not saying that to like drink from the Kool-Aid, I really mean it. Like, we got to have the longest meeting with people from the IndieWeb team, which we were like, we knew of them because we met them in SF a couple times, but it turned out everything that they're building with the help of the Mozilla Foundation and W3C is super helpful to us. We didn't even know this group of people were spending months and months working for free on open standards, and we're like, oh shit, everything you're building is useful for us. And they're like, oh shit, everything we're building, we're looking for people to use it. And so we spent like literally 5 hours straight talking about just like how we can help each other, and it's super awesome. So now we're looking at web mentions, at IndieAuth, at Indie Login, and we've been helping with those communities, and it's been great just finding each other that way. In a similar way, we found people from Google who were like, oh wait, this stack is so much better and stuff, maybe we should look into this. And we're reconsidering their life choices. It was great to talk with Feroz from WebTorrent and have very good discussions about that, because in a way, WebTorrent is really what IPFS is trying to do as well, of decentralizing HTTP basically and distributing stuff that way. So really, really cool discussions there of like, how do you put a file on a web page and make that people who visit it are the node? And so I really like the discussions there. Same with the people from Brave, from Matrix as well. Turns out that we're now talking with Matrix team a little bit, it's early, but we started then hosting our own Matrix instance. So if you go to like riot.permaweb.io and matrix.permaweb.io, we run our own servers there. And so it was cool that they featured us on their podcasts and stuff. And like, so we've been trying to help the community that way. And it's actually a fairly big Matrix server now, so we're pretty happy with that. Similarly, we're also running a Mastodon instance now, just because of that event. And so like everyone was like, yeah, fuck Twitter. And so we're like, yeah, let's just run a Mastodon instance. It's so much better. So, you know, we're not censoring the stream, right? When I gave my talk, it was really funny. So Chris was pretty much the same spot relative to me right now in the back. And I'm doing my talk regularly, like just as many other hundreds of times and stuff. and then he points on the side. And like the questions are over and everything, and it's like, and I'm looking, and I get to the closest thing that you'd ever see a human do, like kernel panic, because I saw that Tim Berners-Lee was in the room, and I just like full on error mode, basically. I just crashed 5 seconds. So now it turns out he's a human being with thoughts and stuff, but like, you know, for me, he was like David Bowie level kind of guy. So it was interesting. I also got to DJ my biggest party yet at DWeb Camp. Were you there dancing at the party at the last day? Like, no, well, thank you. So it was cool. Everyone was getting tired. It was the last night. And I was like, I have my USB key with me. And people were like, oh, I have the thing. And so a bunch of people who were like too excited to go to sleep the last night were like, fuck it, let's throw a party. And it became like from a group of 4 people who were like, let's do something, to this like crowd of, I don't know, 40, 50 people who just started dancing for like, it's like a 3-hour set or something. And it was super fun to do that, because I normally just DJ at small parties with friends and stuff, so this was great. And it was great to see people are enjoying that. Lastly, I got more involved with the Internet Archive. So this has been great, getting involved here with the meetup, obviously, and also talking with the team here, see if there's any insights I can bring on the design side of things and all that. So that's been great. And that's all I have. Thank you. Can we have a hand for Andrew also, please, from Textile?
Thank you. So I didn't know what to expect from tonight, but I was going to tell you 2 specific topics. Oh, okay, so yeah, I'm from Textile. Our objective, long-term objective, is to help figure out the future of personal data on the web. Right now, kind of short-term, we're trying to figure out, we think IPFS is one key piece of technology for that future, and so we're trying to figure out how to make it work in today's projects. So I went to camp this summer. I went to the IPFS camp. Was anybody at the IPFS camp? A few of you, yeah, nice. So I went to the IPFS camp, and then I went to the DWeb camp, very much to learn about how some of our experiments were working and get feedback about what else needed to be built for making projects work on IPFS. And so 2 things came out of that we've been really focused on ever since. One is there are so many different projects trying to figure out what the storage format of personal data is going to be on the web. And so we've been calling it user siloed data. So what does user siloed data look like? What is the form it takes? And so we've been trying to figure that out. If anybody's familiar with Textile, we had our first experiment towards that called Threads. And we learned a lot about it, and over the summer we were getting feedback about what the next version of Threads needs to look like. And so just a quick thing about what we learned. Access control on the web is super important on the DWeb. Synchronization is a really big problem that we need to figure out and have good solutions that work for a broad number of use cases. Multi-writer logs have been a common solution to these things, but they're a point of view on data, so they have an opinion, and it doesn't work for every case. And encryption is formatting. And so what I mean by that is that encryption is inherent in the way that we store data on the DWeb. And so we took a lot of that feedback and we started figuring out what that should look like. And we have a sort of a technical write-up of that we have a draft of. And if any of you are really interested in these things, grab me afterwards or just email me on textile.io, and I'd love your feedback on that draft. And what we're trying to do is figure out what that looks like and get as many people interested in helping us design that and implement it in as many cool ways as possible. So that was one thing. What is the format of personal data on the DWeb? It's a really important topic that we need to figure out. And then the next thing that we really got interested in as a specific use case is privacy on the DHT. So if anybody's using IPFS in their projects today, there's a topic that comes up, and actually at the DWeb camp, I think I spent 90% of my time in side conversations. Like we would be walking to one of the regular track things and then end up in just this little circle of people talking about 1 or 2 topics. 3 hours would pass. And then we'd be like, oh, okay, great, we should go to that, oh, it's over, and then we'd keep talking. And then, and one of them that we talked about a lot was privacy on DHT, and so we've been working on some really cool examples of how to actually use the regular web, use HTTP for what it's really good at, which is just keeping secrets. So actually using the DWeb, which is, in our case is IPFS, and then linking in the regular web, the old web, for actually hiding things on the DHT. And we have some cool things that I'd love to show for that. And then out of that work came a concept of basically what a web services look like on IPFS, which is a really tricky thing.
DHT probably means distributed hash table, but could you kind of like make sure everybody knows?
Yeah, so DHT, the distributed hash table. Sorry, I'm trying to fit it in 5 minutes. Yeah, the DHT, the distributed hash table, it's how IPFS and other projects in this space have solved the problem of figuring out who's hanging on to what and how you route between different people with cryptographic keys. That's, I don't know how to fit it into a short explanation, but yeah, you can look it up if you want the long explanation. But so yeah, anyways, we were working on kind of those two things, and then the third derivative thing, which is what do web services look like in a peer-to-peer world? And we have some really cool services or like ideas for how that could work that are coming up. So I'd love to talk to you about any of that stuff. But that's it.
And I want to invite you to take your writing, and we created a Medium channel, Stories of the Decentralized Web, and we'd love to publish that. You know, IPFS is the decentralized storage layer, and also they attempt to do the transport layer as well. But if you go beneath that, a layer deeper, you get to the mesh networks. And we were at a place like this with very little bandwidth. We built these towers to bring in bandwidth from Mountain View over the ridge and down into the coast. But once we had that internet connection, we had to distribute it over hundreds of acres. And that was quite an undertaking. To talk to you about the mesh network that supported all of this is Ben Elam, who was part of that big mesh team. He's also part of Pseudo Mesh and the People's Open. So Ben.
Great. So I didn't help design the network, really. That was Ben Lau. Has Ben talked about the letter? How's this? Yeah,
That's better.
great. Did Ben give a talk here at some point for the group?
Not yet.
Great. Well, he should totally do that, and I won't try and infringe too much into that territory. I do want to talk a little bit about kind of that process and maybe why that, like kind of some of the fun aspects of having that network and having that temporary mesh. So this was developed largely in the open on GitHub. There was a DWeb Camp 2019 organization, so maybe watch that space for next year if you're interested in being involved. Initially it started out with Raspberry Pis, but moved to espresso bins, which are just these little single board computers that are like a more expensive Pi with some more capabilities. We had some challenges, mostly from like things like power. Some of the stuff was meant to be solar and wind powered. Other power issues are like people unplugging your power. So I think a big thing for me with decentralization and like assigning trust in a large system is like remembering where your barriers lie and where you do have like trust in people and that you have real human interfaces that you have to account for. And I don't think those are ever going to go away. Or if we do, then we won't have much to worry about. Other issues were with getting mesh services up. We didn't have a good solution for securing any of those services. We didn't have a good way of advertising them necessarily if like MDNS wasn't working out. Scuttlebutt was working pretty well. You could just sit next to somebody and meet a lot of people. DWeb Camp is maybe one of the, apart from like Scuttle Camp, might be one of the best places to meet a bunch of butts because you don't have to follow a pub to do it there. You can just find a lot of good people to follow and get going with that. But more generally, dealing with security, both physical and otherwise, from the network in a distributed system or in a community network gets really tough. At Pseudo Mesh, we use Babel-D, and we have pretty much anybody can, if you get our firmware and a compatible router, you can get onto our network. and you can see everybody else in the network. And so dealing with that, for instance, at DWeb Camp, when somebody joins the network and then starts giving out DHCP, then things happen. And in these systems, we don't have the same kind of security tooling that we have in the usual networks that we might be used to in an enterprise environment. You can't really we don't have the same monitoring in place, we don't have the same tool sets, and really we don't have the kind of knowledge for dealing with it. There are interesting problems in that space, and if you're interested in them, then DWeb Camp next year could be a really great time to experiment and meet with other people and play and create in that space. So I want to kind of hype that part of it. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's a good reason for having networks like this, where you're building out something new, where you are. I don't know how many people here are into more traditional IT or really like ripping cables or whatnot, but it gets exciting to me. And it's a good place to learn it. It's a great place to come volunteer for camp if you're looking for an excuse for finding some way to plug in with that. So if so, reach out to people involved with the organizing, and you can have a lot of fun.
So what Ben is referring to is, I think he and his team came out to the farm at least 4 times before the build. And then we were all together doing something called the build from Monday to Wednesday before everyone came. And that's when a lot of the bonding happened, and it was just a great, great time. And Ben was the hero because they couldn't get this one node up. And like Ben was pulling out, the other Ben, Benedict Lau was pulling out his hair. Why is this not working? And Ben figured out that someone had crimped a wire in the wrong way, and that was taking the whole building down. So thank you, Ben, for figuring that out. I want to bring up the guys from Plan System. They are here from Austin, and they have a totally different project that is very, very interesting. So come on up. Drew Mira and Brandon Wallace.
Thanks, Wendy. It's great to be here. Yeah, I'm Drew, Brandon here.
Hi.
Yes, we're from here from Austin, Texas. We were at DWeb showing off our prototype called Plan, a community collaborative organizational tool that interestingly uses a game engine as the top UI layer, not necessarily a web interface. And then under the hood, we've got all the point-to-point and exciting features. But the story of this really is cool because it goes back and aligns with DWeb and the principles underpinning what we've already talked about here. We opened earlier with what are some of the words and phrases and feelings that come with decentralized, and we identify that decentralized is just the starting point into a much deeper way of being as human beings, or at least that's my feeling. And I know Brandon's here with me. So we thought we'd share about some of the design pillars that went into the project that we came to discover were pretty much in line with DWeb and why it was such a wonderful place to be there with everyone.
We found DWeb through Peter Wang. We weren't, like a lot of people, we didn't know what to expect. I think even the people that were holding it didn't necessarily know what to expect. But we were looking for a community that shared our values, and I really feel like we found that match. And so I think it would be a good idea to share with you what we feel like are the matching values.
Yeah, cool, thanks. Starting with, we'd like to say total data privacy and total data ownership. Is the information that we're generating as people, is that really on someone else's pocket too? Do you have a choice? And if someone is monetizing that for you, well, maybe we give that away, and I agree. But how well are people even aware what's happening? We know that news headlines that a lot of people are just becoming aware of these things. So, does the system in question, does this piece of technology, does it even provision for human beings to stake ownership for what's theirs, and do they have that choice? Or is it provided in a way that someone else is monetizing that?
Community-centric permissions, the ability to create and manage your own accounts, and when you're going to you lose your keys or something, you're not going to Redmond or to Google or to some other entity that is inserting themselves within your community, so that sovereignty lies at that community level, and that our identities are more apt to be supported by our communities rather than some other arbitrary entity.
Yeah. So off-grid first. Does this piece of technology, does it provision for the fact that the internet might be unstable, that there could be natural disaster conditions, or just economic conditions, or real-life circumstances where there's connectivity issues, and the more we study history, the more that we see that geopolitical conflict or new change does happen. Can an agricultural community like the mushroom farm have an entire work schedule, containers, and information structures so that whether or not their internet goes in and out of service, can they still function logistically? So is this technology off-grid first?
Data redundancy, and of course we all lie to ourselves and say our data is redundant, but we're basically, if we're keeping all of our stuff on site, then we're not really accomplishing data redundancy, and part of that data redundancy is our network, and that our network is contributing with us and helping us secure each other.
Yeah, cool. So it's in the end, is this all usable? Is this available in an interface that's usable by non-technical users, right? And we know that through our human faculty of the visual cortex. Is this technology able to be used in a way that's intuitive, so that someone who isn't really around computers can operate alongside a highly technical person and interact with the same underlying data, but maybe they have different interfaces. So, and speaking of interfaces,
Hardware agnostic. Actually, you were saying interfaces. So, the spatial interface. Can your interface or can your interface accommodate for the fact that we are spatial beings, that our way of understanding the world comes through our eyes and this visual faculty, and that we place ourselves in a world, that spreads out beyond just what's in our mind and imagination. So if we really want to understand our networks better, we have to be able to visualize our networks. So we need that ability.
cool. And does the system in question, is it hardware agnostic? Are all the pieces interoperable? So that, okay, great, maybe there's this great piece of software. Oh wait, but we can only buy it from this hardware manufacturer? Like, no, that's not okay, right? We recognize that there's an interchangeability of parts and components that is really important, or else we're just putting power and control into someone else's, sphere of influence in a different way, right? So.
And then I'll just wrap this up with pluggable, extensible, and gatekeeperless. And we can't have the infrastructure of the internet owned by a gatekeeper that's inserting themselves in the middle of our communities. And these are, if you go through this list and look at Facebook Libra, for example, you can point out several ways that they fail. And that's how we can point out and know that, no, we should not have this as our economy of the future. When you evaluate that based on the values that you want to use to build this network, and if they don't match, then you move on and you find another technology.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Wendy and DWeb.
Thanks, you guys. If you're ever in Austin, be sure to stop by the DWeb Austin group. So we have 3 more speakers. I'm going to have to ask you guys to keep it pretty tight because we overbooked this. But I'm going to bring up Matt Davis. Matt was the head of the humanitarian track, the solidarity track on DWeb 2018 Summit. And I want to ask him how coming changed his trajectory.
Thank you, Wendy. And thanks everyone for being here. Yeah, so again, my name is Matt Davis. I really found this community kind of circuitously. I first found out about the first 2016 DWeb Summit through a random Google search and reading a little bit about IPFS, I think. Ended up sending Wendy an email in early 2018 saying, hey, I heard y'all are planning another one of these, I'd love to help. As a total outsider, no one, who'd never even been to the Internet Archive before. And she wrote me back and invited me to come meet her for coffee. And I ended up being the co-track lead of the Solidarity track at last year's DWeb Summit. And the point of that track was similar to what Mai was talking about with the Global Fellows Program at this year's DWeb Camp, was to really make sure that the people building these technologies are deeply connected to the communities that may need them, and that the types of gaps in representation that may have led to some of the unintended consequences of the design of the original internet are balanced out. So, as a lot of people have mentioned here today, the DWeb Camp was a really unique kind of technology conference. And I think Matthew said he felt like he found his people in this community. I feel very similarly in terms of the technologists who are very value-led. But just being idealistic and having values driving what you're trying to build, I don't think is enough. And I think it's easy to be idealistic and still accidentally create consequences that you're not aware of. And a lot of that comes from our own gaps. And so, you know, I stand here before you as a programmer and a software developer and an activist, but also as a person of extreme privilege. And I think it's easy for me to think I'm building great things and not realize some of what may come from those things. So as much as I'm excited about idealism that we have, I think there's a risk there. And so coming out of DWeb Camp and all the amazing connections and all the incredible projects that people are working on, my deep conviction still is that we need deep links between communities around the world that are vulnerable, that we think may be able to benefit from these technologies, and the people building them. And that doesn't mean us going and saying, here, let us save you with our technology. That means building deep partnerships where we're working together with them to build these things, if it's what they need. Or first and foremost, we're listening to what they actually need and what the realities are on the ground. And that's part of the mission of my organization. I'm working on Change Labs, is to build deep partnerships with communities around the world and then experiment together on tools for social change. And for changing power dynamics and circumstances and realities on the ground towards the edges, as our marketing says, of optimistic possibility. Because I do believe lots of different worlds are possible, and the best outcomes come when we co-create them all together. So I'd love to talk to folks who are interested, who have cool projects, who are connected to vulnerable communities that might want to get involved. Thank you.
That's changelabs.io, changelabs.io. Margaret Warren. Margaret Warren is an artist. She is a technologist. She helped build the mesh. She drove people. She was the total DWebber. So please come on up, Margaret.
Okay. Right. Hello, thank you. Okay, so let's see. This odyssey for me started out when in February when I came to a decentralized web meetup here and learned about DWeb Camp. And I was interested in decentralized technology because I have an application called Image Snippets, which is for describing images using linked data. Linked data is one of those terms now, along with knowledge graph, that actually comes back from something called the semantic web, which is an idea that Tim Berners-Lee has had almost immediately after he created the web to begin with. So I have been working for many years on that. Before that, I was actually an electronics technician in the Coast Guard, and I had a business for many years as a consultant doing hardware and networking for small businesses and organizations of anywhere from 2 to 30 people along the North Gulf Coast of Florida. So I came out here, I was familiar with Solid, I was familiar with decentralized theories, and interested in how to have my software exist in this philosophical and technological framework of what we've been talking about with decentralization. So I jumped on this bandwagon and sort of got involved, and what was very exciting for me was that I did get to go out with Benedict Lau, who is just wonderful and who had designed the mesh network, and I was putting together these nodes with him, flashing the espresso bins and the Raspberry Pis and trying out building these nodes. And it was so exciting to me because when I was doing my networking, you know, 15 years ago, these technologies didn't exist, wireless wires and things like that. And so it was just an omnitics, and I was like, wow, boy, could I use these, you know, when we were running like cable across streets and stuff in the middle of downtown Tallahassee. So anyhow, that was super exciting to really learn about these, and that got me inspired to learn a little bit more about People's Open, which I keep trying to get even more involved about, because I think this is just a fantastic idea to try to bring these hardware technologies into spaces for underserved communities. But I also got to do a lot of other things at DWeb Camp. I got to give a lightning talk about image graphs, which is where the technology kind of overlaps between describing images and what I'm doing with my system. So as a result of the things that I've learned by talking to many of the people here, I have, we've already transitioned our software so that now I have instances of it running in a virtual machine, so that, and we're going to look at how to use the immutable URIs and IPFS maybe, or DHT, and be able to run the system completely independently of the internet, to be able to add the type of data that I'm creating using linked data techniques, which is meant to be used in a number of ways to describe images, such that you can follow the FAIR principles. And if you know anything about the FAIR principles of open data and open science, it's for things to be findable, attributable, interoperable, and reusable. So I think it's really important that we have a lot more information that goes along with images, especially because of the way that images are constantly being misused on the web now. They are, even the Amazon fires, they used photos that were 3 years old that weren't from the current fire. They used photos of Baltimore riots that were pictures of riots from Oakland 5 years previously. So images lose their context and intention, and they get misused. And I feel like the more data, the better. And then I have to say that the highlight of probably my life at this point is that if you've been building a semantic web application for over 10 years, and you actually get to sit down with Tim Berners-Lee for like 4 hours and talk about your software with access control and linked data and semantics and so on and so on, that's a real highlight of your life. So that would have never happened without DWeb Camp for me to be able to do that. So this is why things like DWeb Camp are so exciting and interesting, because now, you know, I've learned a whole new set of ways to think about the work that I'm doing, and how to look at it ethically and in a different way, and in a different way of how to not have business models, but have use cases. So, and that's another talk for another time. Okay, so that's about it.
Thanks, Margaret. There might still be pizza over there if you want. Hey, one of the great secret sauces of our group is that at any one given moment, you might have the father of modern cryptography, Whit Diffie, Brewster Kahle, the founder of the Homebrew Computer Club was there, Mary Lou Jepson, One Laptop for Child and Open Water. And it's this amazing kind of, they call them the OGs, the original gangsters, the original guys and gals who created this web. And you can just kind of chat with them. Many ages, many ethnicities, many genders, all together. So our final speaker of the night is the founder of the DWeb Berlin Meetup, and he's going to talk a little bit about self-sovereign identity, but also how this is becoming a global movement. So I want to welcome my dear, dear friend, Joachim. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Beautiful people.
Yeah.
So this was the opening ceremony, right? And yeah, I really like, you know, how the warmth radiates from this picture, and it connects to many of your impressions and experiences that you just heard from everyone. And yeah, Wendy said so. I today want to give you a little bit insight of DWeb Berlin and what's going on there. And normally I don't talk about my own organization so much, but today I would like to do this. And so it's Eurocom, we build decentralized identity, and the idea goes way back to 2002, but in 2014, I decided, okay, now the time is ripe to make this a reality. And those of you who have been building decentralized technology know that it's really hard. So it's not like, you know, you use some tools and in a couple of weeks you have an app or something like this. And it's not only hard to build, but it's like everyone tells you it's not possible. And it's like, it's really incredible. You have to ignore these people, and you have to be stubborn and persistent. But of course you cannot do it alone. So today, Eurocom has a team of 12 really wonderful people, and they made something happen. So Eurocom, as of 2 weeks ago, has a fully functional identity system, and we actually, thank you. So we had with a couple of partners in Bonn, Germany, a presentation of a e-scooter ecosystem, and these partners included a large telco like Deutsche Telekom, but also a couple of startups from the Berlin area. What this basically for the first time shows that you know, when you rent a scooter, what happens first? You know, this kind of tier or circular line. So you walk up to them, what do you need to do? Download the app, create an account, exactly. So this is so yesterday. Today, basically, you have like, you carry your credentials with you in a smart wallet, and you walk up to the scooter and scan the QR code, and then the credentials necessary to rent the scooter are requested by the service, and you consent to it, and with one click the scooter unlocks and you're ready to go. And today, a couple of hundred telecom employees, as part of this pilot project, are actually using this, and it's working. So that's really a great moment for us.
Congratulations.
So thanks to also the community and to my team and all the partners. And that's for Eurocom, but I'm also leading another project from Berlin. You have mentioned Trent McConnelly. He's the co-founder and CTO of BigChainDB. nowadays more known as Ocean Protocol. And they have been building an interesting project called Scribe. And back then it was basically like, how can you have digital art secured in the internet? So basically like with a watermark secured. And they built it on Bitcoin, and they quickly realized that it will never go live, right? And then they were wondering, okay, maybe Ethereum no. And so they decided to build a blockchain-like database called BigchainDB. And that was mostly used by companies as private nodes or consortium networks. And IPDB is actually the association of members that create or run nodes as a public permissionless network. And it's a highly modular network, and it has no coin. So that's really an important thing because it creates many, many problems and restrictions. And so what you normally have is like you run a private node where you can store all kinds of data in a JSON format, so you don't have restrictions in terms of how much data you store, etc., etc. And then you have the public network, which actually serves as a trust anchor. And we have a couple of partners, members, I should say, because it's an association, here that helped found this association. And last week in our General Assembly call, we had 6 of these partners who committed to basically set up a node in the next couple of weeks. And this includes BigchainDB/Ocean, Deutsche Telekom, FBK, it's the Italian Research Institute, the Internet Archive, Yolocom, and Brittle Code. And if you want to find out more, so go to ipdb.io. We also have a research, resource site where you can find out drivers and all kinds of tools that help you experiment with it. And then DWeb. So we heard so much about DWeb today, and DWeb, I mean, there was DWeb Summit 2016, and it was like amazing energy. And then there was a gap of 2 years, and then there was DWeb 2018. And what we felt was, you know, it's nice that we come all together for these 3 days, but what's with the rest of the year? And we cannot travel all the time to San Francisco. And so we thought it might be really nice to have you know, some community activity wherever people feel that they want to come together with like-minded people. And so you run the meetups for how long now, Wendy?
2 years.
For 2 years. And in Berlin, we turned our meetup earlier this year into a DWeb meetup as well. And then we felt like, okay, we actually don't have a real community brand, and we don't have like a general landing page. And so my partner and our designer, Ira, said like, okay, I give you an identity. And this is basically our DWeb identity, which was presented during DWeb Camp. And as you can see, what happened at DWeb Camp spontaneously, or for whatever, there was so much magic in the air. There's a whole bunch of local nodes. that popped up. So we have Austin presence today. Then we had Shanghai, so they had their first meetup actually on Saturday, and I attended this via video chat, so it was really cool to see the crowd coming together. Arizona, Boston, it's, what's his name?
Jackson.
Jackson, exactly. And then we have Perm, and then we just got an email that Prague is opening at the Crypto Institute for Anarchy, which is like a really cool place. So I have been there just months ago for the Rebooting Web of Trust workshop. And yeah, so this is, I think, a really cool development of the community. And this is like kind of a preview of the new website. And it will be live, well, we don't know exactly, maybe a month or two, depends like how quickly we find time with some developers. And so this will be the home of the DWeb community, where like you will find all the information around DWeb, around our values. So there's quite some content that we still need to put together, and the communities will be represented there. The events will be there, and all this will help us, you know, if we are traveling or if we want to connect friends with this community, to make it grow and help it to become even more decentralized. Wendy, you want to add something to this?
This is a volunteer effort to put together this website, and is Ace here? Oh, did we lose Ace? Anyway, Ace Volkov, ace@archive.org is part of this team, and if you want to join and help build this, you can contact him. Anything else? No? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you also again, Wendy, for organizing this year, and it's like always amazing. Thank you.
I just want to invite you all to one more thing. I'm trying to bring it up on my computer, but I am locked into this. But on October 23rd, we're having a big party here, and we're shutting down the street. It's called World Night Market, and I want you to all come as my guest. So it's on Eventbrite, and we're publicizing it through our Twitter, and you can find that. But if you use the code VIPWH, that's Wendy Hanamura, VIPWH, you can get free tickets. And yeah, please come. It's going to be so much fun. And it's from 5 to about 10. We're going to close down the streets. We have food trucks. Oh, I just live streamed the VIP code. Okay, you can all come. And we're going to have lion dancers, and then we go upstairs, and there will be presentations about all the amazing kind of global impact that the Internet Archive is having with our partners. And then there's a big dance party. And so I think it'll be really fun. And please come back next month for the DWeb Meetup in, I guess, November. And in December, we have a special one. One of the DWeb campers, Giuliano, is also a wine expert. And he's going to do a wine tasting as data analysis workshop. Kind of a geeky wine tasting in which he explains wine and how you perceive wine as a data analysis approach. So I think it'll be really fun. We're going to have tables and beautiful wine and cheese, and even if you don't care about data, come and do the wine tasting. I think there's a cost to this one though, because he's going to bring really good wine. So I'm afraid we don't have time for your presentation, but come next month and we'll get you on the agenda. So Shokunin is going to be helping to kind of pull these things together. And how can they find you and volunteer to be a speaker?
Well, you can find me here. I'm the guy in the green t-shirt. But you can also hit me up on pretty much every chat out there, literally on every chat platform, like actually, because we bridge all of them for the IPFS community and the DWeb community in general. You'll find every single one of them on permaweb.io/bridges. There's a list of every single bridge that we have out there. So we're on Slack, Telegram, GitHub, IRC, Matrix, Discord, some other thing, I forget. Anyway, all of them. And you'll find me there as Shokunin. Yeah, and Discord is just permaweb.io/Discord. It's probably the fastest way to reach me. I'm Shokunin at permaweb.io for email. So yeah, just hit me up in one of these ways and I'll get back to you ASAP.
And if you can come to World Night Market, there will be Jason Scott, if you know Jason Scott, in an elephant suit. And if that is not enough reason to come.
Tacos.
Please have some more drinks, if there's any pizza, and just get to know each other. Thanks for coming.